Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Commander's 2 Cents. On episodes like these, I give you my own personal take on topics about the format in general and current news. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. So today's topic I've actually had on my mind for a while now, but I got the push that I needed from seeing that recently spoiled card, Flavor Judge. Flavor Judge is from the new Unsanctioned set, which is a silver bordered set, so you're not going to see those cards in play in Commander. But while you might not see this specific card in play, it does help point out the ridiculous nature of some of the interactions of the game that we love. It has tap, choose target spell or ability that targets a permanent you control, then ask a person outside the game if the story of what will happen makes sense. If they say no, sacrifice Flavor Judge and counter that spell or ability. And the flavor text is very much on point. It says, and now they're trying to make a brick wall on my property fight a dinosaur to the death. Obviously, that's a very strange interaction, but one that is 100% legal. Sometimes we just get too lost in the game or the cards, and we don't really take a step back to see the ridiculous things that are actually going on. So today I want to go over some of the weirdest things in Magic. Again, with the amount of cards that Magic has in its history, there are going to be some strange things that happen. Keep in mind that there's nothing wrong with having a weird interaction in a game, it's just something funny to point out. These aren't in any particular order, so let's just get started. So with this first weird thing in Magic, I'm going to call it Unlimited Cosmic Power. The most powerful creature of all time in Magic just might be Emrakul the Aeon Storm. There are plenty of decks built around her in other formats, and in fact she's so powerful that she's banned in Commander. She's definitely considered to be the most powerful of the Eldrazi, and the Eldrazi are powerful enough to just completely wipe out planes. Anyway, she's a 15/15 that costs 15 mana. She has this spell can't be countered. When you cast this spell, take an extra turn for this one, flying, protection from colored spells, and Annihilator 6. So a 15/15 flyer that is extremely hard to deal with and gives you an extra turn, this thing seems unstoppable. That is, of course, unless you have got 15 flying squirrels. That's right, perhaps the most powerful creature in the entire Magic multiverse can be stopped by some rodents. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to point this out, and I'm definitely not going to be the last, I'm sure. In Magic, it makes sense. This creature's got 15 power, you've got 15 1/1s that can block it, they can kill it. But if you actually take a step back to think about this, it can be pretty absurd. And yes, the squirrels do need flying, but there are plenty of ways in Magic to give them flying like levitation and tower defense. And ironically, tower defense actually saves the vast majority of your squirrels. Apparently, the most powerful creature in the Magic multiverse is no match for some squirrels that are standing on top of a tower. Emrakul is also no match for a singular spider like Deadly Recluse. Its flavor text says, even dragons fear its silken strands, but should probably change that to Eldrazi. And the fact that having a web in a tree allows you to catch any flying creature is kind of funny as well. Let's talk more about that concept in our next weird thing with the bow is just for show. Nylea is one of the gods of Theros. She has two iterations with Nylea Keen-Eyed and Nylea God of the Hunt. By just looking at both the images, you can see just how powerful she is. She stands above the trees and even above the mountains, and she wields a powerful bow for her hunting. But there's one thing that's missing on each of these cards. Neither version of Nylea has reach. This powerful bow-wielding god apparently can't do anything against creatures with flying. There's even some birds in both the pictures, and she appears to be aiming upwards. And in Nylea Keen-Eyed, she also appears to be jumping too. But regardless of how big this god is or what weapon she wields, apparently a bird can just fly right over her. But in comparison, a human archer can easily hit a bird. Even though this archer appears to be in a tree which is underneath Nylea, she can hit a bird, whereas Nylea cannot. An even more ridiculous one might be something like our Boreal Grazer having reach. It's just climbing around in trees, and yet it can get those birds, whereas Nylea cannot. Now, I definitely understand that the amount of text that's on a card or the power level are definitely taken into consideration when giving creatures different abilities. But when it comes to common sense, Nylea not having reach is just pretty funny. Let's cover another potentially missing keyword ability and tread carefully. For this one, let's take a look at Imperious Great Worm. It's a 16/16 worm, making it even bigger than Emrakul. If you take a look at the image, it looks absolutely huge, standing above all the structures around it. Well, I guess it's a worm, so it's not technically standing, but you know what I mean. Aside from being a giant 16/16, it's got two abilities. It has Convoke, so your other creatures can help you cast it. It's got a pretty high mana cost, so having some other creatures help you, yeah, that makes sense. It also is indestructible, which, yeah, that makes sense. It's got some giant armor on it. It should be pretty hard to beat. The keyword that I think is definitely missing on this, though, is Trample. Trample to me is like running over another creature to get damage through. But this 16/16 giant powerhouse apparently doesn't do that. because as soon as this runs into a creature, it just stops. For whatever reason, it doesn't keep going, it just stops. This giant unstoppable force is in fact very stoppable by pretty much anything. In comparison, something like Charging Badger, which is a 1/1, has trample. This Charging Badger is willing to punch damage through and run over anything if you can get its power up. But as soon as Imperious Great Room runs into a creature, it stops and probably apologizes to that creature. Now, Imperious Great Room isn't the only creature that's guilty of this. A 13/13 like Crozen Cloudscraper somehow also doesn't have trample. And yes, I know that power level always needs to be taken into account when adding more abilities, but these don't really make sense. A giant force to be reckoned with could easily run over any small creature and keep going. But speaking about big creatures, let's move on to our next one with Give Him the Heater. With this one, I want to talk about Brian Stoutarm and his Fling effect. He has, by paying a red and tapping him and sacrificing another creature, Brian Stoutarm deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target player. As his art shows, he's literally throwing the creature at the player. In the art, it shows a goblin, so something like Goblin Arsonist would make sense to fling. It's small enough that this giant could grab with its hands and chuck it. But how about something like Shark to Crab, though? Shark to Crab seems to be quite a bit bigger, but yeah, maybe with two hands, Brian Stoutarm could pick it up and then chuck it with both hands. Now, where I get slightly lost on this are those even bigger creatures. World Spine Worm is absolutely massive. In fact, if there was a goblin in this picture, it would probably be too small to see. But you're telling me that this giant warrior can pick up this much larger worm and chuck it at a player. Now, this interaction might not make too much sense, but it's pretty funny when you think about it. A similar commander that likes to throw things is Bosch Iron Golem. Bosch has pay 3 and a red, sacrifice an artifact. Bosch Iron Golem deals damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's converted mana cost to any target. So Bosch can chuck something like a Wanderer's Twig at someone or something. That makes sense, it's pretty small, he can definitely chuck it. How about something like an encyclopedia? Pretty funny to think about him throwing a book, but he can chuck that as well. But what about something like the Parhelion 2? It's essentially a flying battle station full of angels. Kind of like Magic's version of a Star Destroyer. Apparently Bosch can pick this up and chuck it as well though. And actually because it's a vehicle, if it's crude, so can Brian. The fling mechanic is just pretty funny when you take a step back and actually think about it. And speaking of vehicles, let's move on to our next weird thing with Let's Go for a Ride. Let's just start things off by taking a look at Skyskiff. It's a pretty simple vehicle with crew 1, so pretty much anyone can pilot it. So how about someone like Naban, Dean of Iteration? Naban seems like a pretty smart guy. He's a dean and a wizard, so he could probably figure out how to fly this thing around. But you know who else can actually fly this? Apparently any insect. In the world of Magic, apparently insects can fly planes. Now that's pretty ridiculous, but let's take it a step further though. This insect is going to pilot the Skyskiff. Now perhaps the controls are easy enough that an insect could actually operate it. Sure, let's go with that. But now we're going to use the Skyskiff to crew the Silent Submersible. So this insect is flying a plane, which it's using to go inside of a submarine and move it around. But it's going to get weirder than that, because now it's using that submarine to steer a pirate ship with Sleek Schooner. Again, an insect is flying around a plane, which is inside of a submarine, which is then moving the wheel on a pirate ship. And then that pirate ship is being used to steer around what appears to be a flying city. And then that flying city fits inside this car. And then that car fits in this train, which is then driving a carriage. So let's just go over this whole thing one more time and how ridiculous this can get. This insect is flying a plane, which is driving a submarine, which is piloting a pirate ship, which is inside of a flying city, which is driving a car, which is inside of a train, which is driving a carriage. These are 100% legal moves completely within the rules, and they make absolutely no sense. But let's take it a step back and just think of one more funny thing. Picture Galta driving around a submarine. A giant dinosaur with tiny arms in the sea driving around a submarine. Alright, but now let's move away from vehicles with time to suit up. With this one, let's take a look at another Elder Dinosaur. Nezal was actually my first deck tech on the channel, and that was actually a Voltron style deck. So you'd equip a bunch of equipment onto Nezahal and swing for lethal. But when you actually take a step back and think about equipping things onto a giant dinosaur that's in the sea, it kind of makes no sense. Hey Nezahal, here's some boots. Put these on. First off, Nezahal doesn't have feet, it appears to have flippers. Now let's say that they're magic shoes and they can adjust the size, so yeah, let's go with that. If you somehow get these on the back flippers, though, how does it actually make Nezahal faster? Putting boots on some flippers would probably slow it down. But anyways, let's move on to the next thing. Nezahal, here's a sword. Nezahal's teeth are bigger than the sword, and somehow this sword will help it deal more damage. And how's it going to wield it? Again, flippers, no hands. Does it just carry around in its mouth and hope to hit things with it? But now let's give Nezahal some cobbled wings. This tiny contraption is somehow going to get this giant elder dinosaur airborne. The most ridiculous equipment for Nezahal, though, might be hot soup. Carrying around this hot soup apparently makes it so that other creatures don't want to block you. But again, Nezahal is definitely underwater. Regardless, the more equipment that you put onto a creature, the more ridiculous this all looks. This water dinosaur is apparently wearing boots, flying around, it's carrying some soup, and it's got a sword in its mouth, presumably. And because of that, it's going to easily kill you in 1 or 2 hits. Now, Nezahal is a living creature, so this kind of makes sense, I guess. But perhaps an even more ridiculous scenario is putting all this on a wall. So try to wrap your head around putting all this equipment and attaching it to a wall. Speaking of walls though, let's move on to our next weird thing with getting walled off. Let's take a look at Amaranthine Wall, which is just a wall that appears to be sitting in a field for whatever reason. Who decided to build that wall there and for what reason? I don't know, but let's not ask questions on that. Because Arcades is coming in and it says that you can attack with that wall and it's going to assign damage equal to its toughness instead of its power. So this wall can now somehow attack your enemies. I'm not sure exactly how it does that. Does it just like fall over? Like on top of, like your enemy gets in front of the wall and then just falls over on top of them. I mean, picturing this or pretty much any wall is going to be interesting in seeing how it actually fight. Does Crashing Drawbridge somehow leave the rest of its castle to go out and fight for you? I mean, you get the drawbridge, but you're not getting the rest of the wall. And for Alabaster Wall, well, she should probably move if that wall is going to go fight. It'd be kind of strange just sitting on a wall and suddenly it gets up and decides to go into battle for whatever reason. And it's even funnier when you throw in something like Goblin Diplomats into the picture. These goblins appear to be on top of a wall and can tap to make each creature attack this turn of Fable, so they're basically just taunting your opponent's creatures. So these goblins on top of this wall can taunt your opponent's walls, making them mad enough to go attack you. If that's not a weird scenario, I don't know what is. But now let's move on to our last weird thing for today with Years of Training. This one I've always found to be weird, so I'm really excited to see your opinion on it too. Let's take a look at the beautiful artwork on this soldier token. She's in full armor with an intimidating fighting stance and a giant sword. Obviously, the soldier has been through a lot of training and is ready for battle. But apparently this soldier is a 1/1. So remember our friend the insect? Well, they kill each other. This soldier somehow dies to this tiny insect. What if we put this soldier up against a mouse? Dead as well. The soldier and the mouse will take each other out, and that mouse clearly has to be an expert with that pin. And this soldier can't even take out a pig. I mean, clearly pigs are the most powerful creatures in the multiverse, but still. And with this pig especially, it's pretty funny. This pig apparently used to be a soldier and then was turned into a pig, and because of that, it became more powerful. Again, with all the weird things that I pointed out, I realized that there are certain mechanics and ways that the game has to work, and that it makes sense for the game to work in that way. There's just some weird interactions that can happen. When you take a step back to actually think about it, there can be some really weird things going on. And with that, this show is coming to a close. So in the comments below, let me know what your favorite weird thing in Magic is. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.